A young boy nearly drowned when something, a hand with no body, pulled him under a patch of floating hyacinth. Years later, in a vegetable processing factory, strange events unfold. A worker begins acting like someone else, and a delivery driver is found crawling on all fours, devouring rotting produce like an animal. No one knows why, until a hospital confession exposes the truth. A forgotten soul, buried in silence, is finally speaking out. Let's uncover the full story, right here on Uncle Hollow NX. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. Lin Jianfeng never forgot the summer he turned 10, the summer that marked him for life. That year, he was sent to live with his grandfather in a quiet farming village in Taiwan. No smartphones, no internet, just the sun, the wind, and the canal that cut through the rice fields like a ribbon of moving glass. For a 10-year-old, it was paradise and a daily battlefield for dares and pride. Jianfeng was the youngest in the group, always eager to prove himself. One scorching afternoon, the older kids pointed toward a massive patch of water hyacinth floating in the center of the canal. "Bet you can't dive under that and come out the other side," one boy sneered. "Do it, and we'll call you Sea-Doo, king of the river." Jianfeng didn't hesitate. He wanted respect. He jumped in. The water was cooler than he expected, and the current was gentle. At first, he took a deep breath and dove. But halfway through the thick mat of hyacinth, something changed. He felt a sudden cold sweep across his back. Then pain, sharp, dragging, as if claws scraped from his neck down to his lower spine. And then, worse, something grabbed his ankle, tight, strong, human. Jianfeng thrashed and kicked until his head broke the surface. He gasped for air, heart pounding. That's when he saw it. A pale, bloated hand floating just inches from his face. No arm, no body, just a hand hovering in the murky green water like it didn't belong to the world of the living. The other kids started screaming. Jianfeng scrambled to the bank, shivering, too terrified to speak. And that was just the beginning. Jianfeng didn't speak the entire walk home. His grandfather, Mr. Lin, was waiting on the porch when he arrived, bare-chested, wiping sweat from his forehead, a cigarette half-smoked between his fingers. One look at the boy's pale face and trembling hands, and the old man knew something was wrong. He didn't ask, not right away. He helped Jianfeng dry off, poured him a cup of warm tea, and only when the boy was calmer did he quietly say, "Turn around." Jianfeng hesitated, then slowly pulled up the back of his shirt. There, running from the nape of his neck to the small of his back, was a long red mark, raw, uneven, as if scratched by nails. And on his right ankle, a full handprint, red and slightly swollen, the fingers curling around his skin. His grandfather's face fell. Without a word, he disappeared into the back room and returned with incense sticks, a newspaper, and a lighter. He rolled the paper into a tight spiral, lit one end, and waved the flame around Jianfeng's back and leg while muttering under his breath. "Don't be scared," he quietly said. "It wasn't trying to take you. Not yet." That night, after dinner, the old man sat Jianfeng down and told him a story he had never shared before. Years ago, long before Jianfeng was born, a young woman from the village had gone missing. She was unmarried and pregnant, and her family, ashamed of her, had forced her into hiding. One rainy afternoon, a few fishermen spotted a figure walking into the canal, barefoot, cradling her belly, wearing white. Her body was never recovered. But people saw her again, in the water, always alone, always floating just beneath the hyacinth, Mr. Lin said. He took a long drag of his cigarette. "They say she pulls on children who remind her of what she lost. She doesn't mean to harm, but she never left.
He looked Jianfeng in the eye. That's why I never let you swim out there. From that day on, Jianfeng wasn't allowed anywhere near the canal. He didn't argue. Even years later, every time he saw water hyacinth, something in his chest tightened. It wasn't just fear. It was memory. It was a warning that never really left him. Years passed. Jianfeng grew up, finished school, and like many from rural towns, followed his mother to a factory job in an industrial district on the outskirts of the city. It wasn't glamorous, but it was stable work, sorting, trimming, and packaging vegetables to be shipped across Taiwan. The work was fast, repetitive, and always smelled of damp cabbage and bitter greens. They didn't make much, so instead of commuting hours each day, Jianfeng and his mother stayed in a makeshift sleeping area inside the warehouse. There weren't any proper dorms, just a few concrete corners with old mats, some donated blankets, and if you were lucky, a fan. Nobody questioned it. Everyone was too tired. At first, Jianfeng was cautious about sleeping there. He remembered what his grandfather had said about spirits being most restless in places that saw routine suffering. But there were no canals here, no water hyacinths, just sweat, concrete, and the endless sound of crinkling plastic and crates being dragged. Still, the atmosphere felt off. It wasn't loud or eerie in a dramatic way. It was more like the air inside that factory never moved, like time slowed just a bit the moment you stepped inside after sunset. The first week passed without incident. Jianfeng kept his head down, learned fast, and was friendly to everyone. One person in particular stood out, Wei. Wei was in his early 20s, always joking, never taking anything seriously. He was one of those guys who could talk to anyone, and even when they were all bone-tired, he found a way to make people laugh. Wei's weird, Jianfeng's mother warned. Nice, but strange. Always insists on going home for lunch breaks, even if it's a 2-hour round trip. Why? Jianfeng asked. Ask him yourself, she shrugged. He says he just doesn't like resting here. One day, curiosity got the better of him. Jianfeng approached Wei during a break and asked casually, "Why do you leave during lunch?" Wei gave a lopsided grin. "You like sleeping here?" "It's not that bad." Wei leaned in, his voice lower. "I used to think that too, until something tried to wake me up." Jianfeng stared at him. Wei laughed it off. "Nah, forget it. It's just factory talk. You'll get used to the silence." But Jianfeng didn't forget. There was something in Wei's tone, beneath the grin, that made his stomach twist. The factory was quiet at night. Too quiet. And deep down, Jianfeng could feel something watching. Not with eyes, but with memory. It was just after lunch when it happened. Most of the factory had gone still. The overhead lights buzzed quietly, and a few fans hummed from the corners. Some workers stayed awake, scrolling on their phones or quietly chatting. Others, like Jianfeng, tried to nap during the hour-long break. Wei had slung a cheap nylon hammock between two support beams near the back wall, not far from the crates of sorted greens. He always chose that spot, shady, quiet, out of the way. That day, Jianfeng sat nearby, sipping warm tea and watching as Wei climbed into his hammock and stretched out. "Wake me up if a ghost shows up," Wei joked, eyes half-lidded. Jianfeng chuckled. "You sure you don't want to sleep at home?" "Too tired," he mumbled. "What's the worst that could happen?" 20 minutes later, something was off. Jianfeng was drifting into sleep when he heard a creak, then another. The hammock ropes were swaying, but there was no breeze. He looked up. Wei was sitting up now, not in a sleepy daze, but upright, rigid, alert. His arms dangled loosely at his sides. His eyes were open. But they weren't looking at anything. They weren't normal. They had gone milky white. Before Jianfeng could react, Wei stood up. And what Jianfeng saw next made his chest tighten.
Wei's posture had changed. He was hunched slightly, knees together, feet pointed inward, an unnatural femininity to the way he moved. His arms hung limply, his head tilted to one side, and a faint smile spread across his face. He wasn't joking. He wasn't even present. Wei turned to face Jianfeng. His voice, when he spoke, was soft, too calm. "Shh," he whispered. "Let me rock you to sleep." Jianfeng froze. Behind him, Lao Tong, the elderly night guard, approached, hearing the commotion. His eyes widened the moment he saw Wei's face. "No," he muttered under his breath. "Not again." Wei turned back toward the hammock. He sat down, legs crossed beneath him, and began to rock it gently, back and forth, whispering something inaudible under his breath. And then he stopped. Like someone flipping a switch, Wei blinked and looked around, confused. "What?" He rubbed his eyes. "What's going on?" He had no memory. The whispering, the rocking, the strange movements, gone, like they never happened. But Jianfeng and Lao Tong had seen it. And whatever that was, it wasn't Wei. It was close to midnight when the delivery truck rolled into the factory lot. Jianfeng had volunteered to help with the overnight shift, 3 hours of unloading crates from regional farms. The extra pay was worth the fatigue, or so he thought. The driver was a burly man named Ashan. He pulled the truck into position with practiced ease, hopped down from the cab, and muttered something about needing to use the restroom. "You'll be fine, right?" he asked Jianfeng, adjusting his gloves. "Just need a minute." "Yeah, go ahead," Jianfeng replied. Ashan disappeared into the back corridor, where the restrooms were. Jianfeng waited near the loading dock, arms crossed, tapping his foot. The air was unusually cold for summer. The factory felt heavier than usual. Still, dense. 3 minutes passed, then 5. And then Jianfeng heard the door creak open. He turned, expecting to see Ashan, but what he saw made him take a step back. A woman, young, hair damp, wearing something that clung like it had just come out of a river, was walking slowly down the corridor from the restroom. She wasn't walking with Ashan. She was walking after him, and her eyes never left his back.
Jianfeng blinked. He wanted to call out, but no words came. The woman was silent. Her feet barely made a sound against the concrete. She was just there. As Aishan reached the edge of the loading dock, he paused, shivered, and muttered, "Why the hell is it so cold all of a sudden?" And then she was gone. No footsteps, no sound, just vanished into thin air. A second later, Ashan's body jerked forward, like something had shoved him from behind. He hit the ground hard, arms splayed out, face twisted in shock. Jianfeng rushed over. "Hey, are you okay?" But Ashan didn't answer. His eyes fluttered, his lips trembled, and his fingers began to curl, twitching like he was trying to hold on to something invisible, something inside him, trying to take over. From behind them, Lao Tong arrived. He looked down at Ashan, face pale. "It's her again." Jianfeng looked up at the guard. "Who?" But the old man didn't respond.
because deep down they both already knew this wasn't the first time she'd entered someone, and it wouldn't be the last. At first, Jianfeng thought Ah Shan had just fainted, but then Ah Shan started to move, slowly, clumsily, like his limbs weren't fully connected to his brain. He didn't speak. He didn't make eye contact. Instead, he crawled right past Jianfeng, right past the loading crates, toward the far corner of the warehouse where the discarded vegetables were dumped. It was the part of the factory no one liked to deal with. Leftover produce that didn't meet quality standards, wilted spinach, rotting bok choy, soggy cabbage heads crawling with fruit flies. The smell was foul, a sick mix of decay and ammonia. Ah Shan reached the pile, got on his knees, and started eating. At first it was a handful, mushy lettuce and yellowed stalks, but then he shoved in more and more.
Dianfeng and Lao Tong stood frozen in place, unable to look away. Ah Shan's eyes rolled back. His cheeks bulged. A slick trail of green juice ran down his chin and onto his uniform. He wasn't chewing, just stuffing until he gagged, and then he reached in again. "Stop him!" Lao Tong barked, breaking from his trance. Dianfeng lunged forward and grabbed Ah Shan's arms while the old man held his shoulders. "Hold him, he's choking!" Ah Shan thrashed, his lips gurgling as he tried to breathe through a mouth filled with pulp. Dianfeng pried his jaws open and pulled. One by one, wilted stalks of green slid out, slick and tangled. A few were still moving, maggots writhing between the leaves. Ah Shan gasped, gagged, and finally vomited. A sour cascade of half-digested rot splattered across the floor. He collapsed in their arms, shivering, and just like Wei, he remembered nothing. Did I black out? Why am I wet? Dianfeng stared at his own hands, coated in slime and vegetable filth. He didn't speak, neither did Lao Tong. But something had changed. The factory no longer felt like just a building with machines and deadlines. It felt alive, and it had started feeding. By the next morning, everyone at the factory had heard about what happened. Not officially, of course. Management kept quiet, pretending nothing unusual had taken place. But workers talk, and the story spread fast. The delivery driver, Ah Shan, had collapsed, crawled to the rash pile, and ate rotten vegetables like he was possessed. "He was probably on something," one woman said, trying to sound confident. "Or just starving," another laughed nervously. But the tone at the factory shifted. Eyes darted, conversations hushed when supervisors walked by. Everyone avoided the back corner of the warehouse where the discarded produce still lay in heaps, flies circling overhead. That afternoon, during a break, Dianfeng sat outside near the smoking shed, trying to clear his head. Lao Tong came out and sat beside him, lighting a cigarette with a shaky hand. "You saw it too." Dianfeng didn't answer. The old man took a drag. "That's the second time." "You mean after Wei?" Lao Tong nodded slowly. "And before them, someone else, years ago. There was a girl, worked here during harvest season. Young, sweet, quiet. She got assigned to handle the waste bin. It's always been the worst job. Hot, humid, full of bugs." Dianfeng's stomach tightened. "One day she passed out right next to the pile. By the time anyone found her, she was barely breathing. They say she tried to eat from the bin, thought it was food.
Or maybe she didn't know where she was. No one really knows. She died? The guard exhaled, before the ambulance even arrived. There was silence. Then the old man leaned closer. The company covered it up, said she had heat stroke, said she was weak. But some of us knew better. The smell back there changed after she died. The flies got worse. The lights started flickering more often. He dropped the cigarette, crushed it under his heel. Whatever was inside her that day, it's still here, and it's hungry. Dianfeng looked back at the warehouse. The building stood silent, humming faintly in the late afternoon heat. From inside, he thought he heard the faintest sound. Not a voice, just chewing. Dianfeng tried to carry on like nothing had changed. He showed up on time, kept his head down, and focused on his work. But his body had other plans. It started small, a sour feeling in his stomach every time he passed the discarded vegetables. Then came the nausea, not just from the smell, but from the idea of them. Even when the pile was gone, even when the area was cleaned, his throat would tighten as if the rot were still lingering in the air.
And then came the dreams. At first, they were blurry, like memories half remembered. He was back in the canal as a child, the water cold, the sky overcast. He saw the patch of hyacinth floating in the center, heard the dare, felt his body sinking. But the dreams shifted. Now, when he dove beneath the surface, he wasn't alone. A figure waited for him under the hyacinth. A woman, her face pale and bloated, hair drifting in the current like seaweed. She didn't swim, she hovered. And her hand, the same hand, reached for his ankle again and again. Jianfeng would jolt awake, gasping, sweat-soaked and trembling. He stopped eating at work. He avoided the back corner of the warehouse altogether. Even his mother noticed. "You're losing weight," she said one morning. "You look pale. Are you sick?" "I'm just tired," Jianfeng lied. But the truth was harder to admit. He could feel her, not just in his dreams, but in the way the shadows moved in the hallway when no one else was around, in the way certain cold spots lingered longer than they should, in the whispers that tickled the back of his neck when he was alone. She wasn't finished with him. Whatever presence had haunted that canal all those years ago had followed him. Not through space, through memory, through pain. And now it was starting to wear him down, piece by piece. Jianfeng hadn't been to the night market in weeks. He used to love it. The sizzling food stalls, the buzz of neon signs, the smell of fried tofu and grilled squid. But lately, he'd felt like a ghost himself, drifting through each day, barely present. His mother, worried, dragged him out one weekend. "A change of scenery will help," she said, linking her arm through his. "Let's walk, eat something, buy nothing, just breathe." Jianfeng nodded, though his chest still felt heavy. They wandered past vendors selling pineapple cakes, herbal teas, second-hand clothes. The crowd was light that night, the air thick with humidity. Then Jianfeng stopped. Ahead, under a flickering bulb, was a vegetable stand. Ordinary at first glance. Plastic crates filled with bok choy, water spinach, Napa cabbage. But it wasn't the produce that caught his eye. It was the girl behind the stand. She looked young, barely 20. Her hair was tied back in a loose ponytail, skin pale, almost translucent under the yellow light. But her face? Soft, familiar, wrong?
that froze him in place. Jianfeng didn't blink, didn't breathe. She looked up and smiled at him. Not warmly, not kindly. The smile was flat, knowing, like she'd been waiting. Jianfeng blinked, and just like that, she was gone. The stand was empty. The vegetables remained untouched. No one else around him seemed to notice. "Feng?" his mother asked, touching his arm. He turned toward her, his hands shaking. Then he looked down. A bunch of vegetables had appeared in his hands, damp, muddy, leaves torn and wilted. He hadn't picked them up. The vendor was gone. No stand, no crates, nothing. Just him, in the middle of the market, holding soaking wet produce on a dry night. He dropped them, breath catching in his throat. People were staring now. But Jianfeng didn't care, because he knew what he saw. She had found him again, and she wasn't finished. Not yet. The incident at the night market left Jianfeng rattled for days. He stopped going to work. He barely ate. He dreamed less, but the heaviness in his chest grew, like something was building, waiting. Then one morning he got a message from a former co-worker. Boss Lin is in the hospital. Lin was the factory floor manager, a strict man, always barking orders, always hovering. Jianfeng didn't know him well, but he knew enough. Lin was the one who assigned new workers to the waste corner. Curiosity, or something deeper, drove him to visit. The hospital room was dim, the curtain pulled halfway shut. Lin lay in bed, pale and sweat-soaked, IV in his arm. He stared at the ceiling, lips moving slightly. The nurse leaned over to Jianfeng and whispered, "He's been like this since yesterday. Keeps mumbling. Doesn't respond to anything else."
Jianfeng stepped closer. Lin's lips trembled, his voice a hoarse whisper. I didn't mean to. I just mixed it wrong." Jianfeng froze. "I told them it was safe, that it would kill the worms, not the girl." The nurse blinked. What? Jianfeng's throat went dry. What did he say about a girl? Lin kept mumbling, eyes glassy. "They said it was just heat stroke, told me to lie, but she was shaking. Her eyes rolled back, foam at her mouth." He coughed. "I tried to wash the bin out afterward. It wouldn't come clean. The smell, it stayed." The nurse looked concerned, writing notes. But Jianfeng already knew it hadn't been an accident. The girl who died, the one no one talked about, had been poisoned. Not by intention, but by neglect. By a shortcut someone thought wouldn't matter. Now Jianfeng understood. This wasn't just a haunting. It was revenge. A memory that refused to be buried. A voice forced into silence that found its own way to scream. And he wasn't just witnessing it, he was part of it. Jianfeng never went back to the factory. He quit quietly. No notice, no farewell. His mother understood. She didn't ask why. He took a job at a smaller farm on the edge of the city, one that didn't run through the night, that didn't carry the scent of chemicals or mildew or things left to rot. But the weight didn't leave him. Every now and then, he'd still see her, in reflections, in puddles, in piles of greens stacked too high, sometimes in dreams. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. He knew why she was still here. There was no proper funeral, no apology. No one ever said her name out loud. So Jianfeng started a ritual of his own. Every ghost festival, every Qingming,
He'd walked to the alley behind the old apartment building, where he used to sleep during breaks. The corner of the loading dock where she died was long torn down, replaced by new steel beams and sterile white tiles. But he remembered the exact spot. He'd place a small offering, a bowl of steamed rice, a stalk of greens, washed and fresh, and a single stick of incense. He never asked her to leave. Instead, he whispered the same words each year. "I remember you. I'm sorry. I hope this helps you rest, even just a little." The flame would flicker, and for a moment, the air would go still, calm like the seconds before a storm or the pause after a long sigh. He never told anyone, because this wasn't a ghost story. It was a consequence. And sometimes, the only way to make peace with the past is to promise the dead that they are no longer forgotten. Not all ghosts are here to haunt. Some just want to be remembered. This isn't just a horror story. It's a wake-up call. The story of Lin Jianfeng and the haunted factory reflects a truth many people choose to ignore. That some injustices don't fade with time, especially when no one takes responsibility.
A young woman died in that factory, silently, unfairly. There was no funeral, no justice, not even a name mentioned. But her memory didn't disappear. It seeped into the walls, the produce bins, the air workers breathed every day. The real terror isn't the pale hand in the water or the eerie whispers after dark. It's the company memo that rewrites truth. It's the silence of those who saw something and said nothing. When we push tragedies into corners and label them accidents, we forget that pain doesn't vanish. It waits. Sometimes it finds its voice in flickering lights or cold spots. Other times it returns in dreams. This story is a reminder. The dead don't haunt the living because they're evil. They haunt us because we let their truth die with them. You just heard a story that chills deeper than ghosts because it's rooted in real human failure. What do you think? Did the spirit ever find peace? What would you have done if you were in Jianfeng's place? Let us know in the comments. We read every single one. And if this story left you thinking, shivering, or just stunned, do us a favor. Hit that like button. Share this with someone who loves dark mysteries, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Don't forget to ring the bell, because tomorrow's episode unravels a disappearance that stayed unsolved for 17 years. And trust us, you won't want to miss it.